The prophecy said it 2,000 years ago, that country was going to be an image of the beast. It was going to speak like a dragon. Satan was going to take domain over that country through the Vatican and through the Jesuits, using its army.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
There has been a working in that country, an infiltration through the Jesuits to ultimately get to power. They want the power in the Senate and they want the power in the military.
But the burdens of global citizenship continue to bind us together.
And it continues to the point where it will take that country to force the entire world to worship the beast with the mark. Take a look at these presidents, what their true belief is. Because they are believers and they can, to the public, say that they believe in Christ, but they are worshipping Satan himself.
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order.
Everything was falling apart. I found out that the Black Pope, the Jesuit general who actually runs the Vatican in Rome behind the scenes, was also a Mason and a member of the Communist Party in Spain. They manage both sides, both left-wing and right-wing. They are inside the atheist communist movements and also in the right-wing conservative movement. So in 1776, this order, continuing with its same character, infiltrating whoever they need, and one of the liberals were the Freemasons. They needed to get into Freemasonry because they were achieving great power. People in the elites were connected to these secret societies, so they needed to get into them and get to the high places into power. If we follow the shape, we can see here the square and the compass of the Masonic lodges, and it points to certain letters, an M, an A, an S, an O and an N. Mason. Well, definitely we have this symbol. And it says it's a Greek letter delta to transition. Transition to what? Transition to the Novus Ordo Seclorum, the New World Order. The Legion of the Dragon is what we will be talking about today. An army that is working with a very evil purpose. The dragon in the Bible is representing Satan himself, the fallen angel, Lucifer. And the Legion of the Dragon is an army that is working on his behalf. An army that is working here on earth. A human army. People that are soldiers working with his purpose. Working to fulfill the plans of the devil on this earth. And this is what we will see and how this army started to attack, infiltrating a certain country. We mentioned in the previous part about how Revelation 13 talks about two beasts. The first one referring to the Vatican and the second one referring to the United States. A country that was built upon great principles. Principles of religious freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of conscience. But those are being attacked. And those principles on which it was founded, that country, it is going to have a totally different character because the prophecy said that it was going to talk like a dragon. So that means that it was going to have a satanic character. A character like the first beast, Rome, the Catholic Church. So we were analyzing this image that we are seeing here. We were analyzing how these three powers were working towards the final deception, the final great deception. The Vatican, the United States, along with secret societies. And these symbols, as we see here, the obelisk in front of them, with what they represent, are uniting their powers through these buildings that we see here, which are very similar, both the Vatican and also the Capitol. That means that the first beast wants to dominate the United States of America. That means they need to get to that place precisely, to the Senate, inside its politics, its governance. And how do they do this? Or how are they doing it? That is what we're going to see. The last part, we were talking about the French Revolution and how the character of the Vatican is also in atheist movements and Republican movements. What was taking us to this point was this little red hat. The Phrygian cap, as we saw, belonged to the Mithraic cult at the time of the Roman Empire, and even before that, 1,400 years before Christ. and where this belonged. The Phrygian cap was used by the Jacobins that were created by the Jesuits. They were instigated by this Jesuit power infiltrating Freemasonry through the Illuminati to take these anti-Christian movements, anti-monarchical movements, to take down a certain government at that time and create a new order in that country, in France. That would also serve to create new orders in other countries, as we saw, for example, in Spain, that used the same representations and used the same symbolisms with the Jesuits behind it also. So they are controlling both sides, both left-wing and right-wing, and they are constantly presenting these two opposites to be able to take the population, society, in a certain direction. As we see here in this image, the Spanish Republic was also represented by a woman with a Phrygian cap. Once again, this woman here, even with these flags beside her, with these wings, reminded us of the Persian goddess, or the Armenian goddess, which was Anaita. She was represented as the Marianne in the French Revolution, and also the Marianne in the Spanish Republic, which they had their own revolution also. But Freemasonry was involved in this, the Illuminati were involved in this, and the Jesuits were involved in this. And we see that the same goddess that was worshipped in the times of the Persian cult with Mithra, her mother, the Immaculate Mother of God, Anaita, which is the same Marianne represented in the French Revolution. We saw also how in the French Revolution this woman, Sophia Momoro, was enthroned as the goddess of reason. But she was nothing else than a Catholic power, as we discovered through the symbolisms that were behind her, the ones that we see representing her. One of them, for example, was this stepping on top of Christ, on top of the Bible, on top of the truth. So they are handling both sides. They are in control of the whole situation, and people do not even realize this, how these kind of movements were also controlled by the same, apparently conservative power. But they do not care what kind of character they need to represent to society. They just know that they have a certain plan, they have a goal, and that is to bring their Antichrist to this world, to show it to the world so that they can rule over society in a new world order. That's their main goal. Well, we also saw how certain situations, for example, as the massacre of Bartholomew, where the Catholic Church, in some point of time, from 538 to 1798, 1,260 years, had domain over especially the European area. But there were certain people at that time that decided to flee from Europe. They were fleeing from Europe, from this dominant power, from not only the Catholic Church, but also certain Protestant churches that were persecuting Christians that wanted to read the Bible and wanted the truth. And they arrived to another country, one that was basically raw. There were some people there, as we know, in the United States, in what is the continent. There were people already living there, but it was practically empty, this country. And they established their own nation, founded on certain principles that were Christian, yes, but they always respected freedom of religion, freedom of cult. But in that country, what happened? There was a certain civil war. This civil war was prophesied that it was going to happen, and the prophecy also says that there will be a second civil war. Yes, a second civil war in the United States. That if we take a look at the current news, then we can see that it's quite close to come. There was a civil war in the United States, but also, who were behind this movement? Once again, we see the power of the Jesuits were behind the movement of the civil war. That chaos in that country, to be able to take it to an order. They did not manage to achieve their main goal, but they did get it closer. They were closer to what they wanted. But they didn't manage to get full control at that time. They were not allowed. God did not permit it. Abraham Lincoln said, "This war, the Civil War, would never have been possible without the sinister influence of the Jesuits. They are the main instigators of this bloody conflict. I have known many of them in my life, and I cannot ignore the fact that they hate this country, its institutions, and its constitution. They want to destroy our schools, alienate our citizens, and overthrow our freedom. This was said by Abraham Lincoln in 1886. Well, it was registered in 1886 in the book Chinaki in 50 Years in the Church of Rome. This was a Catholic priest. Let's take a look at our introduction video. So many plots have already been made against my life that it is a real miracle that they have all failed, when we consider that the great majority of them were in the hands of skillful Roman Catholic murderers, evidently trained by Jesuits. But can we expect that God will make a perpetual miracle to save my life? I believe not.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no secret is revealed. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
The view that America is part of what has gone wrong in our world, rather than a force to help us make it right, has become all too common. Yes, there have been differences between America and Europe. No doubt there will be differences in the future. But the burdens of global citizenship continue to bind us together. A change of leadership in Washington will not lift this burden. In this new century, Americans and Europeans alike will be required to do more, not less. Partnership and cooperation among nations is not a choice. It is the only way, the one way, to protect our common security and advance our common humanity.
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order, because the global order is changing again. And the institutions and rules that worked so well in the post-World War II era for decades, they need to be strengthened, and some have to be changed. So we have to do what we do best. We have to lead. We have to lead.
Well, as we saw, something that Obama said is very true. Definitely a change in the administration of Washington, of the United States, is not going to change the fact that they are going to go in the same direction, that they are leading this new world order for someone, because they are working for someone. Although some people may believe that the United States is the one that is going to take world dominance to them. Well, not exactly, because the prophecy says that the second beast, the United States, will be an image of the beast, but will force everyone in this world to worship the first beast, the Vatican, the Catholic Church. So that means that this power is going to give into the hands of the first beast the whole mass of humanity. That people are going to be given to the Vatican to worship the beast through the mark of the beast. Now, how did this infiltration work? We have seen here different presidents of the United States throughout the years. The first ones warning that the Jesuits and secret societies were going to work into this country, infiltrate to be able to get to power, to positions of power. And eventually, what do we see? Well, presidents of the United States involved in secret societies, in Freemasonry, Skull and Bones, as we will see, and working for the Jesuits, this power. Through symbolisms, we will also be seeing this. Revelation 13:11, the second beast. Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. 2 horns like a lamb. In the Bible, a lamb is referring to Christ. So this country would be born as a Christian country. And the character of the lamb precisely is humble, obedient, kind. And this country was born in this manner, obedient and humble. And then was prospered. Why? Because it began with a good foundation of true principles. It says that it came out of the earth. If we remember, the first beast came out of the sea. And the sea was referring to many waters, many nations, multitudes and people and tongues. Well, the earth is the opposite. It's a desolate land, a land that has no population, practically, that has practically no people, tongues and multitudes. It is all the opposite, isn't it? And it had 2 horns like a lamb. 2 horns. That means that 2 powers, two principles were the ones that took that country to prosper. And one of them was the civil liberty, liberty of freedom of speech, but also freedom of religion. These both things were the ones that were going to guide that country to prosper as it is today, or has prospered as the most powerful, if we can say, country in this world. Now the prophecy said that this country was going to be led by Satan himself at some point of time, because it was going to speak like the dragon, which is the serpent, the old serpent, the ancient one. Now, the serpent itself, we can see this symbolism also, the power that's guiding this country. As we can see here, the auditorium of the Vatican, this is Leo XIV entering this building to be able to talk, to preach to these people and to the entire world. And we can see that the interior of this building is precisely the head of a serpent. And between the 2 fangs is where the Pope speaks. And he speaks to the entire world from this place. He is the tongue of the serpent. He is the tongue of the dragon. He is the voice of Satan himself on this earth. Even from outside the building of the auditorium has the head of a snake shape. Revelation 13:11-18, the prophecy said, let's continue from verse 12. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf, and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of the people. Because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast, who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. As we saw in the previous part, there was a wound to this power, but then it would recover itself and eventually would be healed and would become that beast once again. The beast that was, is not, yet is. And that this power, the United States of America, the second beast, was going to be an image of that beast. It was going to be a copy. It was going to act in the same manner. How did the first beast act? Well, it would act against freedom of conscience. So something has to happen with the Constitution of the United States because in the Declaration of Independence, the moment of the foundation of that country, that was one of its founding principles. The amendments that defends the right to believe in what you believe, what you want to believe religiously. If they have to enforce a mark that forces people to worship a certain religion through a certain symbol or manner of worship, then that means that they have to change their constitution. Something has to happen, that the principles and foundations of that country have to be destroyed. From verse 15 it says, "The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads." So it is saying here that everyone is going to be forced to worship the first beast. So even all that refuse to worship the beast will be killed, as has happened in the past during centuries. People that refuse to worship the Vatican, to worship their idols, to worship their doctrine. What is the church established as the Roman Catholic Church? Many people throughout history, millions of people, have refused to obey, knowing that the Bible explains the truth. And the truth is that this is the power of the beast. This is the power of Satan himself. And they were massacred and murdered. And there will be a moment in time when people will be murdered because of the truth. And it says that all people, rich and poor, big and small, that means everyone on this earth is going to have to make a decision, either to worship the beast through the mark of the beast or worship God. So that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666, the famous number. We've already all heard of this. 666, the mark of the beast, a satanic number. But what is it? This is what we're going to be seeing. So this country began like this, humble, like a lamb. And it was young, meaning that it was going to be a young country that was going to need its time to be able to grow. It's not an already grown up, formed country. It is something that needed to come out from nowhere, from the earth. At that moment of the creation of that country, they had their own constitution. The First Amendment of the United States says, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." So this means that there is freedom of speech in this country, freedom of conscience. Now, this is something, as we read in the previous part, that the Vatican despises and is going to do everything that is in its hand to destroy this manner of working in that country. In an encyclica of Pius IX, he said, "With such an idea of social government, which is absolutely false, they do not fear to advocate the opinion that is supremely harmful to the Catholic Church and to the health of souls, which our predecessor, Gregory XVI, of venerable memory, called delirium, and that is, namely, that freedom of conscience and worship is a right proper to every man, which must be proclaimed and established by law in every well-ordered society, and that citizens have a right to total freedom, which must not be restricted by any ecclesiastical or civil authority, by virtue of which they can openly and publicly express and declare their opinions, whatever they may be, whether by word of mouth, in the press, or in any other way, and while they recklessly assert this, they do not think or consider that they are preaching the liberty of perdition." Well, this is a strong statement. This is saying we have to put order. Countries that in their constitutions, in their way of functioning, they cannot allow freedom of speech. Freedom of speech in the press, in the media, this cannot be allowed. What does this mean then? Then we are going to go there. We are going to go to those places and take them down, to bit by bit work them up to the point where freedom of speech disappears. And they are the ones that will be in control at the end. So the United States of America began, and as most of us may know, George Washington, for example, was a man that belonged to Freemasonry, secret societies. I'm not saying that the whole entire country of the United States, I mean the founders, were all in Satanism, because we know that there were certain Christian principles in the building of this country, as there were Christian principles in people that were in Freemasonry at that time. We have to know that not everyone at that time that was a Freemason was involved in satanic cults. Many of them did not know exactly where they were and did not have a true light of what this really means. But eventually, this secret society movement in this country was going to get much more and much darker, as we will see. So, as we said, the Jesuits were the ones that were going to infiltrate Freemasonry. Ignatius of Loyola founded the Company of Jesus, better known as the Jesuits, in 1540 to end with the Protestant reform in a more sophisticated manner than merely with weapons. Well, definitely a more sophisticated manner, with words, with dialogue, with infiltration, with murder, with assassination, with poison, is how they were going to get into countries, churches, religions all over this world. And this is the army, this is the Legion of the Dragon, the Jesuits. As we saw here, Ignatius of Loyola stamping on top of Martin Luther with the symbol of Satan itself through the lightning bolt. In 1776, the Jesuits created the Order of the Illuminati, infiltrating Freemasonry and provoking the French Revolution, as we saw. The Jesuits were dissolved in 1773 by Pope Clement XIV because of accumulation of power. He died 1 year later of poisoning. Well, that's a coincidence, isn't it? So this man, this Pope, Clement XIV, he orders to close, to eradicate the order of the Jesuits, and 1 year later he is poisoned. We see that this power does not care who is in power. In power, I mean in the throne of Rome. They want to establish their power on the throne of Rome. They want to gain that place. Now, there was a man called Alberto Rivera. He was a Spanish Jesuit priest, and he eventually left the order because he discovered what was the true meaning of being a Jesuit priest, which we will see here through his testimony. And this man was eventually poisoned as well. There was attempts to murder him various times, and eventually these people managed to fulfill their objective. On the 20th of June of 1997, he was murdered. And he had a very special information to share. And before he was assassinated, he shared it out through a certain comics that were published through an American publishing. And he said, "After I destroyed the seminary and was taken back to the Vatican in Rome, I was ordained, that is appointed, a Jesuit priest. I was so skillful in this espionage work that I was placed under the extreme oath and induction. Here is my card, my ID card, and the official certification from the Archdiocese, my superiors, to work in foreign countries. After I left the institution, I was made a bishop in the old Roman Catholic Church, receiving my bull of consecration under the apostolic succession of the Roman popes." And here we see on the left his national ID and the document that states that he was a Jesuit priest. This ID card was issued by the Spanish government in Spain in 1967 under the rule of the Spanish dictator Franco. His secretary forces were equally as strict as the Gestapo had been in Germany. To obtain this document, Alberto had to supply birth certificate, identification papers, and positive proof from his archdiocese of being a priest. Several security organizations were involved, similar to our CIA and the FBI. The priest, Alberto Rivera, had to be approved by all organizations to receive this document. There was no way it could have been a forgery. There is no question he was a priest. What you see here is positive proof. This document was granted by a government that had pledged absolute submission to the Pope through the Concordat signed by the governments of Spain and the Vatican. Yes, because there are certain people that say that this man, he was false. He was not a Jesuit priest at all. That all of this is forgery. Well, we see that the documents say that it's not. He was an authentic Jesuit priest. Here he explains when he went to study to be a priest, he thought that he would find the truth and that he would have peace in his heart, as he had promised his mother. But on the other hand, he felt horrible because while he was ascending in the Jesuit hierarchy, he saw more and more corruption inside the institution, up to the point when he was invited to assist a black mass, a secret black mass, by some Jesuits of high category in a monastery in the region of the north of Spain. And when he kneeled down to kiss the ring of a high prelate, he saw a symbol that left him cold. He says here, "It was a Masonic symbol, a thing I hated, and I had been told to fight against it. Everything was falling apart. I found out that the Black Pope, the Jesuit general who actually runs the Vatican in Rome behind the scenes, was also a Mason and a member of the Communist Party in Spain." As we said in the previous part, they manage both sides, both left-wing and right-wing. They are inside the atheist communist movements and also in the right-wing conservative movements. My head was spinning as I found out the Jesuit general was closely linked to the Illuminati in London. I was 6, so for weeks everything I was ordered to fight against all tied together at the top. And at the bottom it says here, Ignatius Loyola, founder of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, was a member of the Illuminati, which los alumbrados, or the enlightened. What it's saying here is that the Illuminati, the movement of the Illuminati, was something that began before even the moments that the Illuminati of Bavaria were founded. They were already with this movement of the enlightened inside the Jesuit order. Because of my experience in espionage, I was ordered to join the ecumenical forces under Pope John the 23rd. The Protestants were no longer to be called heretics, but separated brethren. The communists were no longer our enemies. And here we have the image of a priest saying, "We have successfully infiltrated all of these organizations." The believers, one world church, the Protestants of all denominations, Orthodox churches of all kinds, Muslims, the Brahmics, the Buddhists, the Mormons, the occult churches, the Eastern religions, the Jehovah's Witnesses, Science of Mind, Judaism, etc. All these churches were being infiltrated by the Jesuits so that they could be controlled and take them through ecumenism to the New World Order. And he continues saying, "Our masterpiece is the third force, which is the charismatic movement. This is the bridge to Rome. Those Protestants have accepted us with open arms because they are also controlling the non-believers to the one world government, the communists, the all-Masonic lodges, the socialists, the atheists, and the labor unions, etc. All of these different ramifications of society, both atheist and both believing, are being controlled by this Jesuit power. Thanks to our undercover agents, we have quietly moved into Christian TV and publishing and have been accepted as teachers, pastors and evangelists. We are pushing only love and unity to pull us all together. This is our revival." Through only love and unity, but leaving aside the prophecy and the doctrine, they were managing to infiltrate these religions to be able to create their own doctrines. Doctrines that are definitely against the Bible doctrine, the true one. The first Protestant groups they moved on were the Seventh-day Adventists and the Full Gospel Businessmen, then into the Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterians, Lutherans, etc., until they were all infiltrated, including the Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses. All the seminaries, universities and colleges were next. The Jesuits directed Catholic Youth Action, the Legion of Mary and Knights of Columbus who pulled it off. Now these groups are silent about Rome or claim that the Roman system is a Christian church. Now this is the objective, the main goal, because they were Protestant churches that were saying that the Vatican is the beast, as we have proven. And now are they preaching that? Where is the protest? The protest has disappeared because the Vatican have done a great job through the Jesuits. Here's just a glimpse of the havoc these guys have caused. Starting civil wars, assassinating presidents and dictators. They caused World War I and the Second World War and the First World War, and etc., etc. Modern communism. They tried to stop Israel from becoming a nation, etc. All of this was their interest. But at the bottom it says the Jesuits despise Israel and want Jerusalem for the white pope. This is something very interesting because we can see that there is a fight for Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the belly button of this world. It's the center, the epicenter of the chaos and the havoc that's occurring. Middle East, because the Middle East, Jerusalem, there is a power that wants that place, and that is Rome. It says here, only about 2% of Jesuits become priests. that means 98% of them are basically invisible, all around us. And this doesn't even count the millions educated in the Ignatian way in Jesuit schools, colleges and universities. Good heavens, these people are capable of anything. Could our missing church members have fallen into their hands? If they did, their general would certainly know about it. So, there is a certain power that is working for the dragon, and it is its special army, the Jesuits. Now, Ellen White also wrote about them, and she said something very interesting. Throughout Christendom, Protestantism was menaced by formidable foes. The first triumphs of the Reformation passed. Rome summoned new forces, hoping to accomplish its destruction. At this time, the Order of the Jesuits was created, the most cruel, unscrupulous, and powerful of all the champions of popery. Cut off from earthly ties and human interests, dead to the claims of natural affection, reason and conscience wholly silenced, they knew no rule, no tie, but that of their order, and no duty but to extend its power. The gospel of Christ has enabled its adherents to meet danger and endure suffering, undismayed by cold, hunger, toil, and poverty, to uphold the banner of truth in face of the rack, the dungeon, and the stake. To combat these forces, Jesuitism inspired its followers with a fanaticism that enabled them to endure like dangers and to oppose to the power of truth all the weapons of deception. There was no crime too great for them to commit, no deception too base for them to practice, no disguise too difficult for them to assume. Vowed to perpetual poverty and humility, it was their studied aim to secure wealth and power, to be devoted to the overthrow of Protestantism and the re-establishment of the papal supremacy. That is their goal, the re-establishment of the papal supremacy. For that beast that was, that is not, but it will be. And they will be that beast at the last moment, because they will represent the papacy. When appearing as members of their order, they were a garb of sanctity, visiting prisons and hospitals, ministering to the sick and the poor, professing to have renounced the world, and bearing the sacred name of Jesus, who went about doing good. But under this blameless exterior that most criminal and deadly purposes were often concealed. It was a fundamental principle of the order that the end justifies the means. By this code, lying, theft, perjury, assassination were not only pardonable but commendable when they served the interest of the Church. Under various disguises, the Jesuits worked their way into offices of state, climbing up to be the counselors of kings and shaping the policy of nations. They became servants to act as spies upon their masters. They established colleges for the sons of princes and nobles, and schools for the common people, and the children of Protestant parents were drawn into an observance of popish rites. All the outward pomp and display of the Romish worship was brought to bear to confuse the mind and dazzle and captivate the imagination, and thus the liberty for which the fathers had toiled and bled was betrayed by the sons. The Jesuits rapidly spread themselves over Europe, and wherever they went, there followed a revival of popery. And what are we seeing today in the United States? A revival of popery, a revival of Catholicism, and we will see how this evolved. Now, was she lying, Ellen White? Was she lying on the character of this order? Well, we will see the Jesuit oath, the oath that a Jesuit priest has to do, and we will see if she was lying or not. This is extracted from Alberto Rivera's testimony. As we can see here, this is the moment where it is explained. My son, therefore you have been taught to act the dissembler among the Roman Catholics, to be a Roman Catholic, and to be a spy even among your own brethren, to believe no man, to trust no man, among the Reformers to be a Reformer, among the Huguenots to be a Huguenot, among the Calvinists to be a Calvinist, among the Protestants generally to be a Protestant, and obtaining their confidence to seek even to preach from their pulpits and to denounce with all the vehemence in your nature our holy religion and the Pope, and even to descend so low as to become a Jew among the Jews, that you might be enabled to gather together all information for the benefit of your order as a faithful soldier of the Pope. You have been taught to insidiously plant the seeds of jealousy and hatred between states that were at peace, and incite them to deeds of blood, involving them in war with each other, and to create revolutions and civil wars in communities, provinces, and countries that were independent and prosperous, cultivating the arts and the sciences, and enjoying the blessings of peace. To take sides with the combatants, and to act secretly in concert with your brother Jesuit, who might be engaged on the other side, but openly opposed to that with which you might be connected. Only that the Church might be the gainer in the end, in the conditions fixed in the treaties for peace, and that the end justifies the means. You have been taught your duty as a spy to gather all statistics, facts, and information in your power from every source, to ingratiate yourself into the confidence of the family circle of Protestants and heretics of every class and character, as well as that of the merchant, the banker, the lawyer, among the schools and universities, in parliaments and legislators, and in the judiciaries and councils of state, and to be all things to all men for the Pope's sake, whose servants we are unto death. You have received all your instructions heretofore as a novice, a neophyte, and have served as a coadjutor, confessor, and priest. But you have not yet been invested with all that is necessary to command in the army of Loyola in the service of the Pope. You must serve the proper time as the instrument and executioner as directed by your superiors. For none can command here who has not consecrated his labours with the blood of the heretic. For without the shedding of blood, no man can be saved. What a twisting of scriptures. Assassination is saving humanity. Therefore, to fit yourself for your work and make your own salvation sure, you will, in addition to your former oath of obedience to your order and allegiance, the Pope, repeat after me. And this is the moment where he swears his oath. I, now in the presence of Almighty God, the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Blessed Michael, the Archangel, the Blessed Saint John, the Baptist, the Holy Apostles, Saint Peter and Saint Paul, and all the saints and sacred hosts of heaven, and we're going to skip this part. I furthermore promise and declare that I will, when opportunity presents, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants and liberals, as I am directed to do, to extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, or condition, and that I will hang, burn, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the walls in order to annihilate forever their execrable race. That when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poisoned cup, the strangulating cord, the steel of the poniard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of the honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person or persons, whatever may be their condition of life, either public or private, as I at any time may be directed so to do by any agent of the Pope or superior of the Brotherhood of the Holy Faith of the Society of Jesus. All this, he says, Alberto, is done in the name of Almighty God. There is no way the Roman Catholic system can be called Christian, not according to the Bible. Well, definitely it cannot. As we see here, the character of this power is exactly as Ellen White explained, and even more explicit in their oath. This is the Legion of the Dragon. I'll leave you here the Extreme Oath of the Jesuits fully in its complete text. So if anyone is interested in reading it from beginning to end, then they can take a look at it. So in 1776, this order, continuing with its same character, as we saw, infiltrating whoever they need to do. And one of the liberal parts were the Freemasons. They needed to get into Freemasonry because they were achieving great power. People in the elites were connected to these secret societies, so they needed to get into them and get to the high places into power. And that's what they did through Adam Weishaupt. So we were talking about the goddess and how these symbolisms are surrounding this goddess were going to help us follow the clues to how the Jesuits were working. Ishtar was accompanied by 2 lions, but also 2 owls. And also we see here Minerva, which was the Roman goddess of war, which is Athena, it's the same one, which is Anaita. It's always the same goddess, was also accompanied by an owl. Anaita, as we saw also, with these wings, these 3 goddesses are the same one, goddess of war, goddess of wisdom. And the owl represents the wisdom, and we find it in the center of the Pentagon. So this is telling us something, that the Jesuits, through the Illuminati, were getting into that country, even to its Department of Defense, which is now its Department of War. This is a aerial image of the capital, and apparently here we can see just simply its gardens around it, the streets around it, and we may not see nothing special. But if we take a look, we can see that it is already built with the shape of an owl in its gardens and roads around it. Also, if we mark certain points, for example, the Logan Circle, the DuPont Circle, the Washington Circle, the Mount Vernon Square, and at the bottom, the White House, they all connect together to make a pentagram, a 5-pointed star, but the satanic one. And at the top of this triangle formed by the Verizon Center, the Watergate Complex, and at the top we see the Scottish Rite, the 33-degree or grade Freemasonic Temple. Well, at the center there, the eye there, they have the 333-mile capstone. So satanic symbolisms in the roads of Washington. I mean, this is amazing. Who is going to see this? Unless you're from the skies, you cannot see this. Well, the Bible says that the demons inhabit in celestial places, that they are the ones that are in the skies, they control things from above. So they are even involved in architecture, these secret societies, worshipping demons, worshipping Satan himself. We said that to destroy freedom of speech, they had to destroy also the press. They had to get into press because the press was defending this amendment of the United States. Well, here we see the National Press Club that's also in its symbol has an owl. An owl on top of a book. An owl on top of a book. So this secret wisdom, secret societies were also going to get into the press. Not only in the press did this order, the Jesuits, have to infiltrate, but also into the banking of that country. To be able to gain domain, they obviously needed control of the money. Here we see an issue of the US dollar in 1862 that, as we see, is completely different of the one that we know today, the famous one. Something happened in history, and it has to do with a boat. With this boat over here, with the Titanic. Everyone knows the story of the Titanic. And in this book, The Secret Terrorist, referring to the Jesuits, it said that the Rockefeller, JP Morgan, and the Rothschild were working for the Jesuits. And they were working for the Jesuits in the plan of the Titanic. Because there were 3 people on that boat: Benjamin Guggenheim, Isidor Straus, and John Jacob Astor IV. These 3 people were on the Titanic at the moment when it's departed. And these 3 people were precisely the ones that were against the Federal Reserve. They were against the movement of privatizing the bank in the United States. And they were 3 people which were one of the most influential and powerful people in the country. So the Jesuits needed to cut their heads off, basically. They needed them out of their plans because they were going against them. They wanted to create the Federal Reserve, to be able to privatize the banking so that through their bankers, the bankers of the Jesuits, which are the Rockefeller, the JP Morgan, and the Rothschild, they could dominate that country throughout the economy. In 1909, the Titanic boat was built, and history says that it was financed by the American businessman JP Morgan and his International Mercantile Marine Company, as we said. This is from the book of The Secret Terrorist. On board the Titanic that night, Edward Smith knew what his job was. he was under oath the ship had been built for the enemies of the Jesuits. After 3 days at sea with only a pair of binoculars to see the bow, Edward Smith accelerated the Titanic to its maximum speed, 22 knots, on a dark night in an ocean completely filled with ice near an area of 80 square miles. Edward Smith did all this despite receiving at least 8 telegrams warning him to slow down because he was sailing too fast. Did Edward Smith even need a warning? No, he had been sailing those waters for 26 years. He knew there were icebergs in that area, but not even 8 warnings stopped this man who was under Jesuit oath and under specific orders to destroy the Titanic. The ship that was supposedly indestructible, the Floating Palace, was created to become the tomb of the wealthy who opposed the Federal Reserve System. By 9th of April 1912, all opposition to the creation of the Federal Reserve had been eliminated. In December 1913, the Federal Reserve System emerged in the United States. 8 months later, the Jesuits had sufficient funds through the Federal Reserve Bank to start World War I. So this man, a captain that was navigating through those waters and had been doing for 26 years, received 8 warnings, slow down, and he didn't slow down a bit. He continued full speed to ram that boat into the iceberg because he was ordered to do so. So in 1912 was the moment when this boat sank. This is Captain Edward J. Smith, and precisely the man who took this photograph was a Jesuit priest. A Jesuit priest that got upon the Titanic at the first moment in England, and I think then it went to, he departed from Plymouth, I think it was, then it went to Ireland. He got off the boat in Ireland after doing photographs of the Titanic and photographs of the captain himself. This Jesuit priest landed in Ireland, and from Ireland the Titanic went to the US, and it didn't even get there, did it? This man here was the captain, as we've all saw maybe as we've all seen in the movie. So in 1912 the Titanic sank, and in 1913 the United States Federal Reserve System began, and in 1914 World War I started. So the current design of the dollar banknotes obverse appeared in 1963, while the reverse dates from 1935, when it was first issued as a Federal Reserve bill. So the US dollar bill changed at a certain point of time when the Federal Reserve was established. And as we see here, in 1935 it was issued as a Federal Reserve bill, after all of this movement that we've just seen. This is the $1 bill that we know today. That is quite different to the one that was established at the beginning of that country. In God we trust. In what kind of God do they trust in, the people that did this? Well, as we see here, annuit coeptis, phrase of 13 letters. Why do I say 13? We will see. He has favored our work, or our work has been crowned with success. 13 is death and birth, total change and transformations. 12 plus 1 equals Messiah. This, obviously, is in secret society symbolism. Death and birth, total change, transformations, Messiah. Doesn't this remind us of the 12 tribes of Israel and Jehovah, or the 12 disciples in Jesus Christ? So they take biblical symbolisms and turn them around to satanic symbolism. This is what they do. In occultism or Satanism, 13 equals Lucifer or Satan. There are 13 levels on the pyramid. And at the bottom we see some Roman letters that is representing the year 1776 of the date of the US independence. But this is also the date of the creation of the Illuminati order in Bavaria. And the famous all-seeing eye, this shining triangle with an eye in the middle. It appears on the covers of the Jacobin texts, the radical French parties during the revolution in their country. Symbol of the all-seeing eye of the master builder of the worlds, or the great initiate, used on coats of arms of Masonic lodges around the world. The Illuminati called it their shining delta. This is the Eye of Horus. Its origin says Egyptian mysticism, or even before, from Babylon. It's a worship of the sun god, symbol of Lucifer, bringer of light. Shining triangle, mental enlightenment, the Greek letter delta, transition. The mental enlightenment, this third eye that is also in the New Age movement. I would recommend the 2030 agenda presentation that we did, because also this talks about the triangle with the eye related to the New Age movement and how that was also orchestrated by Satan. It's a demonic worship. And it says it's a Greek letter delta to transition. Transition to what? Transition to the Novus Ordo Seclorum, the New World Order, the new secular order of the centuries, of the eras, or the New World Order. Now, all of this surrounding this triangle, but what is their main goal? If we take a look at this image, the pyramid, the base, is separated from the top of the pyramid, the triangle with the eye, which is representing a divinity or a false divinity, Satan himself. But what they want is to join it. As we can see here, the Masonic symbol can fit in perfectly. Now you can say, well, this is something that you are trying to fit it in on purpose, but it doesn't represent. Let's take a look. If we follow the shape, we can see here the square and the compass of the Masonic lodges, and it points to certain letters, an M, an A, an S, an O and an N. Mason. Well, definitely we have this symbol. And it also closes to form the Star of Remphan, or what some people say is the Star of David. But neither David or Solomon used this star at all, because the Bible talks about this as the Star of Remphan. It's a demonic symbol. It has 13 leaves on right claw, so once again that's satanic number. Satanic number, which also has a godly symbolism, but Satan takes it to his terrain. The olive branch is a symbol of peace and also of the Jewish people. 13 arrows in left claw, arrows representing military power. 13 five-pointed stars on top of the head of the eagle, forming a Star of Remphan. And a phrase of 13 letters, E pluribus unum, out of many one, or unity in diversity. So we can see that this movement of uniting everyone in the diverse religions and ways of thinking is something that is also in secret societies. They are working for the plan of the Vatican. And all of this in the US dollar. As we can see also, there is a snake's tail, or a rattlesnake's tail, on the left hand side and the right hand side of this US dollar bill. And each of them has 13 beads, these balls, of the tip of the rattlesnake's tail. So this is the other side, the cover of the United States of America. And there is something here that many people do not notice. And that is in the corner on the top right. There is a little animal there. An owl. Once again we see the symbol of the Illuminati. The owl of Minerva. The owl of Athena. The goddess of wisdom, of war. This is Inanna. This is Ishtar. This is Anaita. This is the Virgin Mary. This is the Catholic Roman Church. So as we said, this power that is working for Satan wants a unification of the pyramid. What they want is for Satan to appear the false Messiah to this world and rule this world with that world order. Where do we also see this symbol? In the Bohemian Club, for example, in the United States. This is an article here in Spain which I found very interesting to speak this in this manner, referring to this secret society. The strange secret society to which all the presidents of the United States belong since 1872. As we see here, for example, we see Richard Nixon and we see Ronald Reagan, both of them belonging to this cult. Writers like Mark Twain or Jack London, legendary billionaires like William Randolph Hearst or David Rockefeller, leading conservative politicians like Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld or Henry Kissinger, and presidents of the government such as Dwight Eisenhower, Ronald Reagan and George Bush, father and son. Since it was founded in San Francisco in 1872, the exclusive secret society of the Bohemian Club has counted among its members of the wealthiest, most powerful and most influential men in American history. And as they possibly already suspect, among them there is no woman. Your entry is absolutely prohibited. Today it has been transformed into a society of elitist billionaires who meet every July in the camper of the Bohemian Grove. Among that rest, throughout this century and a half, have been found all the presidents of the Republican government and many of the Democrats, so we can see that both sides of politics, left-wing and right-wing, are both involved in this plan. They are all working for the same objective. It doesn't matter who is on control. The one that is in true control at the end are the ones that they worship, demons themselves. Legend has it that the Manhattan Project, the same one that led to the creation of the atomic bomb dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, took shape in the Bohemian Grove, as it is known in English, during a meeting held 3 years earlier, and that it was also before the members of the secret society that Richard Nixon gave the speech that opened the door to the presidency in 1967. There have also been no shortage of numerous conspiracy theories, some of which are difficult to believe, as the Bohos, the name by which their partners are known, work in secret to establish a new world order and celebrate pagan rituals with satanic connotations. Well, if we think about it sincerely, what other purpose can they have to hide themselves, to organize themselves in secret, than to establish a world order? Until a few months ago, our knowledge of the Bohemian Grove, that exclusive elite hideout for Washington statesmen and prominent people, all male, were minimal. We interpret their behaviors as immature, even shameful, as they act as adolescents with emotional problems. This place is where Kissinger, Ford, Nixon, Bestel, Bush, Cheney, Hoover and their friends come to relax, and if they want to behave like children, it is their privilege because they are on a private estate. However, recent information could change this perception. It seems that its activities not only include getting drunk and drugged, but also participating in kidnappings, rapes, pedophilia, sodomy and ritual murder. Any investigation of these allegations is prohibited by the National Security Act of 1947. For decades there have been vague rumors of strange activities in the most remote areas of the estate. Reliable reports speak of druid rituals, with people wearing red hooded clothes and parading and singing to the great owl in front of a funeral pyre of corpses. For his part, the controversial American journalist Alex Jones, one of the main promoters of conspiracy theories around the Bohemian Club, managed to record what is the most controversial event of the camp, the one known as Burning of Worries. The ceremony is held on the first weekend of the camp at night, facing a small lake. A group of men in torches and dresses in robes and hoods set fire to an effigy covered by a mantle in front of the giant statue of an owl more than 12 meters high. When the video was made public, Ike warned, "These are the people who run our world." President George W. Bush, like his father and grandfather, goes to the Bohemian Grove meetings, arriving a few minutes after filming the ceremony. In a statement, the Bohemian Club said that it was only a theatrical performance that symbolized goodbye to the daily concerns of the members. Here we see one of the images that was taken where they do this burnt sacrifice of an effigy representing their worries and concerns, apparently. And here George W. Bush, father and son, together in this secret society of satanic cult. As we see here, they are all surrounded this place with their god, this owl. These images are taken by people, young people that even got into these gardens to take true, real, modern images of this place. Now let's take a look at the video of Alex Jones.
Hello, I'm Alex Jones, and I'm a radio and television host based in Austin, Texas. And for many years, I've been exposing the criminal activities of the global elite, also known as the New World Order. Time and time again in my research, I come, well, eye to eye with something that's even hard for me to believe. And that's that the elite, again, the so-called establishment kings, those that know best, the visions of the anointed ones, are obsessed with the occult, from presidents to governors to the heads of industry. Now, I personally am a Christian, but even an atheist should be concerned about the information we're about to bring forward in this new documentary film, The Dark Secrets Inside Bohemian Grove. You see, for over 120 plus years in Northern California, in Sonoma County, on a 2,700 acre secluded redwood grove, leaders from around the world, prime ministers, chancellors, presidents, governors, again, the heads of industry, banking, academia, the media, Hollywood, only a select few, a little over 2,000 people, travel there to engage in bizarre ancient Canaanite, Luciferian, Babylon mystery religion ceremonies. At least that was the rumors. And so I went to the library and got on the internet and saw many of the mainstream news articles admitting that world leaders do indeed go there, and they fly into San Francisco and other surrounding cities and drive out into the rural hills and mountains of Northern California, and that these stories have been coming out that they worship some 45-foot stone owl god. And then I began to read some of the documentation on this Moloch character of the Old Testament, mentioned many times in Leviticus. That's in the Bible. Why are world leaders traveling to the middle of nowhere to worship this thing? Well, I had to check it out for myself. And I successfully infiltrated through the Secret Service, through the guards, through the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department. We were inside 4 hours. That's only one day out of the 2 weeks that they meet there for the admitted Summer Fire Festival of the Bohemian Club. Well, basically that's enough for me. It's hard to even describe it with words, and I hope that our hidden cameras can give you at least a small piece of what I witnessed.
The occult activities are coming up. And then after the actual ritual, we're going to give you some more of the history surrounding it. But first off, I wanted to draw your attention to the program that was given out to the spectators or the viewers. I guess an occultist would call them novices, who actually watched as the priest and their supporters engaged in this ancient rite. Now, you're looking at a little demon called PJ that was on the front of the actual program. It's kind of in a Hieronymus Bosch style. He's got a little broom and a dustpan, and he's sweeping something up. Now, even more shocking is the figure of a human body burning in the flames. In fact, I've shown it to people that are experts in anatomy, to actual doctors, and they say that the anatomical size is that of a baby or small child. Notice how large the cranium is in comparison to the torso, that is the ribs. As we sat there in the darkness, not knowing what we were about to see in the gathering crowd, suddenly, across the small lake, we saw a carriage with men in black and brown cloaks, robes, in front and in back, bearing a bound body. Remember, it was a hidden camera and at somewhat of an angle.
Begone, dull care. Fire shall have its will of thee. Begone, dull care. And all the winds make merry with thy ducks. Hail, fellowship's eternal flame. Once again, midsummer sets us free.
Well, after what we've just seen, take a look at these presidents or senators, people that have been in the US government, what their true belief is. Because they are believers and they can, to the public, say that they believe in Christ, that they are Christian or not. But they are worshipping Satan himself. Also belonging to Masonic lodges, like here at the hands of Obama, the President Obama. We can see him here with a Masonic ring and doing the horn symbol. They eventually all work together. Doesn't matter, left wing, right wing, there is no difference. They are all happily working together for their satanic purpose. Let's take a look also at Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones is an elite secret senior undergraduate society at Yale University in New Haven. So this means that all of those powerful elites that have been educated in Yale University were belonging to this fraternity at their young times, which was like the kind of entrance into the power or the places of power in the US government's politics and so on. Here we see, for example, the image of George Bush's father belonging to this Skull and Bones organization, this secret society. Even movies were done to represent this. The Skulls, for example, this was a movie done as doing a fictional representation to be able to normalize into society that these kind of things are, It's just normal between elite people. They do these things to have fun. But behind this are satanic rituals, even of what we've read before. Murders. Ritual murder to be able to worship Satan. Netflix even did a series of House of Cards where one of the main characters had a scene inside the Bohemian Grove. To normalize this into the minds of people, this is just something completely casual. Revelation 17 said, "The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth." We must remember that although these people are in these cults and apparently they have dominance over the world, these secret societies, Freemasonry and so on, are the ones that have the power. They are not in control. They work for someone else. They work for the Vatican. And the Vatican is the one that has always is leading and will lead the world to that new world government. But there were some people that went against this movement publicly, even people that were in power, that managed to get to a certain position and denounced what was happening or what was going to happen. This man, that we all know, was murdered the 22nd of November 1963. And there was a woman that had a testimony referring to Kennedy's assassination. And she said something very, very interesting. Well, while Kennedy was busy shaking hands with all the well-wishers at the airport, Johnson's Secret Service people, this is future President Johnson, came over to the motorcycle cops and gave us a bunch of instructions. You know, that there was going to be a parade where he was going to drive around and people were going to say hello to the president. The dynastist thing was they told us the parade route through Dealey Plaza was being changed. Changed? How? Gene Hill asks. It was originally supposed to go straight down Main Street, so there was an original route, JB said. But they said for us to disregard that route. Instead, we were told to make the little jog on Houston and cut over to Elim. Jean felt her mouth drop open. If you'd stayed on Main Street, Kennedy might have been completely out of range of whoever was shooting at him. My shooter behind the wooden fence definitely wouldn't have had much chance to hit him from there. That means the shooter that was defending Kennedy. JB started at her with a straight face. Maybe that's why they changed the route, he said bluntly. But that's not all. They also ordered us into the craziest escort formation I've ever seen. Ordinarily, you bracket the car with 4 motorcycles, 1 on each fender. But this time, they told the 4 of us assigned to the president's car there'd be no forward escorts. We were to stay well to the back and not let ourselves get ahead of the car's rear wheels under any circumstances. So the protection in the front part of the car was unprotected. I'd never heard of a formation like that, much less ridden in one. But they said they wanted to let the crowds have an unrestricted view of the president. Well, I guess somebody got an unrestricted view of him all right. And on the right part it says, "What are you talking about?" Jean asked instantly. "I don't understand. My friends in the motorcycle say he started ducking down in the car a good 30 or 40 seconds before the first shots, referring to President Johnson." "I'd say that's just a little peculiar, wouldn't you?" "Oh, come on, JB, Gene Hill said, thinking he had to be joking. "They obviously weren't serious, were they?" "As far as I know, they were dead serious," JB said. One of them told McGuire that he saw Johnson duck down even before the car turned onto Houston Street, and he sure as wasn't laughing when he said it. Well, maybe Johnson just dropped something on the floor and bent over to pick it up. I mean, there can be a simple explanation. Maybe so, JB said. I don't claim to know what his reasons were, but this guy said it sure looked like he was expecting bullets to be flying. When I heard it, it made me start wondering about a whole lot of other stuff too. So, Lyndon Johnson, that was at that time vice president, 30 or 40 seconds before the shot that killed Kennedy, he was already ducking down his head. He was already reaching down in the car because he knew what was going to happen. He knew about the change of the route of the parade of Kennedy. he was involved in Kennedy's assassination. So at that moment, Kennedy was assassinated. These are the images of that time. And Lyndon Johnson was eventually the next president of the United States in 1965. And he was the first American president to receive a pope in the United States. Who was he working for? This here is the image of where he was meeting Pope John VI in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. The first American president to receive and invite a pope in the United States. The beast inside the country. And he was allowed to office a mass in the Yankee Stadium, receiving thousands and thousands of Catholics. John Paul II with Jimmy Carter in 1979. So this was the beginning. This was the beginning of the Vatican Pope visiting that country, going there, saluting the people. This was only the beginning. Eventually, this was going to be a symbolism that Rome is taking over that country. And John Paul II was also allowed to do his mass at the Yankee Stadium and talk in the UN, in the United Nations. 1987, we see here, once again, John Paul II received in the United States of America by his president. In 1993, 1995, and 1999, he was also received by Clinton. In 2004, George Bush Jr. did not receive John Paul II because at that moment he was so old in his age that he could not travel to the US. But he went to the Vatican to give him as a present a medal, a golden medal of freedom. Now, an American president giving the medal of freedom to the Pope. The Protestant churches, knowing what the Pope represents, which is precisely the contrary of freedom of speech and freedom of worship, then this is definitely denoting who is George Bush working for. This is evidence, the symbols are there. And in 2005, we see the funeral of John Paul II, and we have George Bush, son, father, and Clinton. The US government kneeled down to the body of a pope. That is, the US, the United States of America, kneeled down to the papacy. The papacy had achieved its goal. It had control. This is the end of this part. As we've seen throughout history, there has been a working in that country, an infiltration through the Jesuits to ultimately get to power. They want the power in the Senate and they want the power in the military. The prophecy said it 2,000 years ago, that that country was going to be an image of the beast. It was going to speak like a dragon. Satan was going to take domain over that country through the Vatican and through the Jesuits, using its army. And it continues to the point where it will take that country to force the entire world to worship the beast with the mark. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next part. What is the mark of the beast then? Some people know what it is, but we need to be able to explain it to others that do not. And this is what we are going to see. So until next time.